There are people who vanish quietly, and then there are people whose absence shakes the world. Jack Nicholson is the second kind. 3 Oscars. 12 nominations. The most dangerous smile in the history of American cinema. For 4 decades, he owned every room he walked into. And then, after 2010, he simply disappeared.
No gubię.
No speech.
No explanation.
Just a closed gate on a hill above Los Angeles. And silence. To understand why he left, you have to understand where he came from. And where he came from was built on a lie. He was born in 1937, in New York City, to a teenage mother named June who couldn't afford the scandal of an illegitimate child in a small New Jersey town. So June's mother, Ethel May, made a decision that would define Jack's entire childhood. She registered herself as his mother. June became his older sister. The boy grew up never knowing the truth, and when officials needed documents for him to travel to California in 1954, a false birth certificate was filed to keep the story intact. The whole household was built on silence and displacement, and Jack absorbed every bit of it before he was old enough to understand what silence really costs. He didn't learn the truth until 1974, when he was already 37 years old and famous. A researcher from Time magazine broke the news to him over the phone. The woman he called Mom was actually his grandmother. The woman he called his sister was his real mother. And both of them were already dead. June had died of cancer in 1963. Ethel May in 1970. The people who could have explained the lie were gone before the lie was ever exposed. But here's what makes it stranger. He didn't fall apart. He said it wasn't traumatizing, because he was already formed. And maybe that was true. Or maybe the damage was so deep it had become invisible. What we do know is what came after. He never married. He kept his romantic life deliberately chaotic. The boy raised inside a secret grew into a man who kept the world at a comfortable, controlled distance. And that distance, eventually, would swallow him whole. But first, he had to become the biggest movie star alive. It almost didn't happen. For most of the 1960s, Nicholson was invisible. His first job in Hollywood wasn't acting at all. He ran errands at the cartoon studio behind Tom and Jerry. He carried mail. He fetched coffee. He watched the whole machine from the outside. He trained as an actor, appeared in roughly 15 films, and had almost no name recognition to show for it. He started writing screenplays just to stay in the game. The role that changed everything only came to him because another actor stormed off set after a fight with the director. That film was Easy Rider. That year was 1969. And the blast wave it created launched Jack Nicholson into a run of performances that has almost no parallel in American film history. 5 easy pieces. Chinatown. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which swept every major Oscar category and made him a legend. The Shining. Terms of Endearment. Batman, where he negotiated a profit-sharing deal that reportedly earned him between $60 and $90 million. As good as it gets. 3 Oscars total. A Monument. And then, quietly, the monument began to retreat. Most people who cover Nicholson's disappearance focus on his health. But there's another thread that explains just as much, the relationships that wore him down, one by one. He was with Angelica Huston for 17 years. One of the longest, most storied relationships in Hollywood. He ended it over dinner. He told her another woman was going to have his baby. Huston understood immediately. She told him there was only room for one woman in the picture, and she was retiring from it. 17 years, ended in one conversation. The other woman gave him 2 children. That relationship also eventually unraveled. By his late 60s, by most accounts, he was tired. In 2013, in one of his last extended interviews, he said something that landed harder than anything else in the piece. He said he was no longer driven to be out there, that he only cared about films that dealt with real emotion. And then he admitted that during his last few movies, he hardly left the hotel room at night. For a man whose off-screen life had been as legendary as anything he ever put on screen, that sentence was a window into something fundamental shifting inside him. The engine had slowed. And once it stopped, there was no reason to keep performing. His final film, How Do You Know, came out in December of 2010. It lost roughly $70 million at the box office. And Jack Nicholson, without ever saying so publicly, never made another movie again. The rumors started almost immediately. Reports of memory loss. People close to him pushed back, saying he was still reading scripts, still considering projects. In 2017, he was briefly attached to a film that looked like a real comeback. Then he dropped out. The production collapsed. His director later noted that Nicholson was still reading scripts all the time, a detail that is strangely haunting, because it means the door was never fully closed in his mind. It just never opened in practice. By 2021 and 2022, sources described a man who rarely left his Mulholland Drive compound. Physically stable, but living inside a world that had contracted dramatically. His children became his primary companions. His son Ray, who has built his own acting career, said he ate dinner with his father every night growing up, that studying his father was how he learned to be a human being. And a source close to Nicholson told the New York Post something that explains the whole disappearance better than any diagnosis ever could. The source said that Jack and his inner circle preferred that people remember him as he was. That part of his appeal had been his extravagant character and lifestyle, and that all of it catches up with you eventually. That is not the statement of a man in crisis. That is the statement of a man making a deliberate choice. He wasn't hiding because he was broken. He was choosing to let the version of himself that the world fell in love with be the version that endures. The monster from The Shining. The Joker from Batman. The rebel from Cuckoo's Nest. Those are the faces he wanted people to carry. Not an 88-year-old man with a cane. And then, after years of silence, he gave the world one final glimpse. February 16th, 2025. The SNL 50th Anniversary Special. The biggest room in entertainment, packed with legends. And from his seat in the crowd, dark jacket, tinted glasses, a Yankees beret, 87-year-old Jack Nicholson leaned forward and spoke 5 words. "Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Sandler." The room erupted. Sandler pointed into the crowd, told the audience to give it up for Jack, that Jack had made it out tonight, that he loved him. And that was it. Photographers caught Nicholson the next day leaving his hotel, walking with a cane. Fans said he still looked good for his age. Others noted the frailty. The gap between the man in the beret and the man who had terrorized his way through the Overlook Hotel was 45 years wide. But here's what really mattered about that moment. Nicholson had never hosted Saturday Night Live in his entire career. He once said he regretted it. So when he showed up for the 50th anniversary, seated in the crowd instead of standing on the stage, it carried a weight that went beyond celebrity. This was a man acknowledging the end of something. Not with a speech. Not with a press release. With 5 words and a round of applause from a room full of people who understood exactly what they were witnessing. It wasn't a comeback. It was a goodbye disguised as a cameo. And then the world he had retreated from dealt him one more blow. In October of 2025, Diane Keaton died. She was 79. They had starred together in Something's Gotta Give, and their friendship went far deeper than one film. She was part of the small circle that still had access to the man behind the gates. Those close to Nicholson were deeply concerned about how losing her would affect him, emotionally, physically, in a life that had already contracted so far. But there were also signs of warmth still flickering. Danny DeVito, a friend of more than 50 years, told People magazine he had just seen Jack around his birthday and that he was great. And when the wildfires tore through Los Angeles in January of 2025, Nicholson quietly offered his Mulholland Drive home to Angelica Huston, the same woman whose heart he had broken over dinner decades earlier. She had lost her own home in the fires. The gesture was private. Neither of them turned it into a story. But it revealed something important. The man behind the gates was still paying attention. Still connected. Still capable of grace from inside his self-imposed silence. So why did he really disappear? There is no single answer. His body slowed down and he said so himself. His appetite for the work changed. The industry transformed into a world of franchises and digital spectacle that had little use for the kind of raw, dangerous, improvisational presence he had spent his life building. The relationships that once kept him tethered to public life ended, one by one. But the deepest explanation is the one his own circle gave. They preferred that people remember him as he was. That is a profound act of self-awareness from a man whose entire career was built on presence. He understood better than most that the image matters. And he chose to protect it by stepping away before the world could watch it fade. Jack Nicholson did not lose Hollywood. He let it go. Without announcement. Without ceremony. Without giving anyone the satisfaction of a final bow. He simply stopped, and let the silence say what words never could. The man who gave us the axe through the door, the grin that could terrify or seduce depending on the angle, decided that the greatest final act was no act at all. just a closed gate, a hill above Los Angeles, and a legacy that needs nothing else added to it. He gave the world 4 decades of performances that will never be matched. And then he gave the world something even rarer, a silence that says more than most actors manage in an entire career.